will give a very brief introduction just by pretty much reading the titles of our presenters for today, because I think if I read all the credentials of this group, then we would be here all day. So we have Thomas Loveland, who is a professor at the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, and he's the Director of Career and Technology Education Graduate Studies program there and the coordinator of Technology and Engineering Education Bachelor's degree. We have Marie Hopeful, who is a professor and associate dean at Appalachian State University. We have Virginia Jones, who is the Dean of Student Success and Enrollment Services at Patrick Henry Community College, and she's also president-elect at ITEA. We have Philip Reed, who is a professor of technology education at Old Dominion University, and he's the 2020 and 2021 president of ITEA. And finally, we have Steve Barbado, who is the executive director and CEO of ITEA. So without further ado, let's get started with our STEL seminar.
Hi, I'm going to get started. ITEA Standards for Technological Literacy was published in 2000 and last updated in 2007. Over the last 20 years, it's becoming apparent that the standards needed to be updated as state departments of education and district technology education supervisors were questioning the validity. In 2016, the Executive Board of ITEA's Council on Technology and Engineering Education, CTETE, set in motion a plan to update STLs. A new set of national technology and engineering standards was developed and published this summer in June. And this presentation will unpack STEL so that you can use it in your laboratory classroom and advocate for technology and engineering education and your program. Next. It's becoming more apparent the differences between individuals and groups in society who understand technology and those who do not. The study of technology and engineering is important for all students, whether they are moving to a college, career, or simply to help them understand the complex world in which they face every day. Organizations such as the National Science Foundation and the National Academies have shown increasing support for technology and engineering education. To read more about this, see the Power Core Standards within STEL document on the ITEA website for more advocacy information. Next. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, Technology and Engineering Literacy Assessment, NAEP-TEL, is part of the nation's report card. NAEP-TEL was developed in 2014 and assesses 8th graders nationally for their understanding of technology and engineering. See the NAEP-TEL website for their assessment framework, videos, animations, and other resources. A program structured on STEL will prepare students for the NAEP-TEL. Next. Technology and engineering education is required for graduation in only a few countries, states, and provinces. Typically, it's an elective program in competition for the same pool of students as art, music, business ed, and other career and technical education or practical arts classes. The study of technology and engineering is important for all students, whether they're moving into college or a career or simply to help them understand the complex world that they face every day. No matter what their life choices are, the pervasiveness of technology will not change. As educators, we must help prepare students for a dynamic future. Next. When thinking about technology, one must first look at it through a broader lens. It's not just experimenting with tools and materials to make things or do projects. Truly working with technology and engineering means knowing about technology, making decisions about technology based on facts, and then doing technology through hands-on work tied to minds-on thinking. For over 80 years, the field has been defined by 3 interrelated dimensions: knowing, thinking, and doing. Truly studying technology and engineering means engaging students in all 3 dimensions. Next. Over the past 2 decades, educators have come to consensus that the best learning occurs holistically rather than in a content silo. In order to better prepare oneself for college or career readiness, linking technology and engineering with mathematics, science, STEM, and other academic areas and standards will result in a person who is better able to adapt and adjust to rapid technological changes in their lives. Due to the size of the mathematics and science fields compared to engineering technology, we have to strive harder to make the case about the importance of technology and engineering in STEM. One of the unique aspects about technology and engineering education is the use of technological and engineering design as a primary teaching process. This is very different than college engineering classes that prepare students for a career as an engineer, or high school classes that give prescribed plans for students to build something. The teaching of engineering design in pre-K through 12 education helps all students use an informed design process to solve technological problems. This is a process we call the little e. With the varied ways that technology and engineering education is taught across the US and the world, it was apparent that the new standards should focus on the 8 critical power standards that all students should know and be able to do, no matter what the classes are or the locations or settings where they're at. The STEL benchmarks are written with active verbs to target specific developmental levels of the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor learning domains from pre-kindergarten through 12th grade.
I heard that the new phrase for this era is, "You're muted." Good afternoon, everybody. As you can see here, STEL has 3 organizers, which include 8 core standards, 8 technology and engineering practices, and 8 contexts in which the standards and practices can be taught. This graphical depiction, you can imagine it as a spinning set of octagons that can be rotated to indicate application of the core standards and technology and engineering practices in a variety of contexts. As Tom has just noted, the STEL writing team, which involved over 40 individuals from K-12 education, from community colleges, universities, other STEM professional organizations, and industry representatives, acknowledged that it's just not possible for every student to have experiences across the broad range of technology and engineering contexts. And their focus is on the importance of gaining a deeper understanding of the core ideas, or what Tom has called power standards, and the abilities, those practices that contribute to technological and engineering literacy. Oh, great. We see the animated version. The original standards, many of you may recall, had 288 benchmarks associated with 20 standards. This wide structure made it difficult for teachers to know what to focus on in their classrooms. I call it a sort of classic inch deep and mile wide problem that really made true literacy harder to achieve. Based on research that was done by the writing team and broad input by, from teachers and many reviewers from around the world, the STEL standards were streamlined to the 8 standards that you see here. And these encompass 142 benchmarks that indicate the most important aspects of technological and engineering literacy that a person should know and embrace by the time they graduate from high school. And you might, as you look at this, recognize some of it from STL, but it really was sort of a broad revisioning and streamlining of the original standards. The format of the STEL core standards is easy to follow, and I would strongly encourage any user of STEL to read the narrative that accompanies each standard, because this provides some very helpful additional background information that will help you understand the accompanying benchmarks that are associated with each standard. Users will see also that the benchmarks build from pre-K through grade 12, meaning that as students progress across the grade bands, they have multiple opportunities to engage with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that should enhance their level of literacy with the material. The standards and benchmarks have been carefully written to provide teachers and curriculum developers the precise intent of each benchmark. And each of them includes examples of how the benchmarks can be applied across the grade bands. Next, we see in the inner circle the 8 technology and engineering practices that outline the personal qualities and attributes that students should develop in order to apply the knowledge and skills described in the standards. These are based on contemporary educational initiatives like the Engineering Habits of Mind and 21st Century Skills. And these practices will be or should be demonstrated by students as they work in technology and engineering education settings and activities. Teachers should really help students make use of these practices within their lessons by explicitly modeling the practices and providing opportunities for their use. For example, if you have a group design activity, this can provide multiple opportunities for students to collaborate, to communicate with one another, to exhibit creativity, and more. So you'll see that it's not sort of a linear thing that we would look at these practices in isolation from one another, but they could be, applied in any given activity or lesson. Some of the practices will need to be described more fully and or modeled by the teacher to really help promote student understanding of their use. And as I just noted, there's often overlap in the application of technology and engineering practices. Again, it's not linear. These things often occur, at the same time or within the same lesson. The intent and the goal of STEL is that these practices will be given, students will be given multiple opportunities to use these practices to gain the knowledge and skills identified in the standards. And to gain expertise in the technology and engineering practices across the pre-K through 12 grade bands. And finally, in our graphic, we have the 8 technology and engineering contexts. These are the settings where the standards and practices will most likely be taught. And although it is probably tempting to think of these as just traditional course titles, the contexts were actually specifically chosen to represent those broad categories of technological activity that can serve and should serve as the backdrop for addressing the standards and for applying the technology and engineering practices. And particularly at the pre-K-12 level, the expectation is that acquiring the knowledge, skills, and abilities that underpin technological and engineering literacy is the primary goal, and context-specific knowledge serves as the vehicle to get there. So it really be up to each local district to determine the context, or if you will, courses that make the most sense given local interests and local resources. And it's important also to note that these contexts go beyond just course titles and can be found in student organization activities, through regional engineering competitions, students' personal interests and hobbies, field trips, even specific activities in math and science classrooms. And the example that you see given here is typical of those that are found in the STEL document. It describes a technology and engineering education setting linked to a benchmark from Standard 4 and Practice 7. And throughout the STEL document, you will find examples like this to help you, teachers and curriculum developers, understand how to apply STEL in a very practical way.
Good afternoon. I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about how curriculum developers and teachers can use STEL to develop curriculum and lessons. STEL is not a curriculum, but it has a very sound structure that allows you to develop curriculum and lesson plans and assessments for technology and engineering. So you see in this table on the left column are the 3 domains of learning. And then in the middle column, you see the technology and engineering dimensions that Dr. Loveland talked about previously. And then the right column are the outcomes that we're seeking. And we measure those using the benchmark verbs, which Dr. Hopeful mentioned are active verbs that are measurable. So you can see the connection between these 3 columns. We're aiming to measure students' knowledge, skills, and dispositions as they move through our technology and engineering courses. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of page 21 of STEL, which shows the first standard, and it is structured just like Dr. Hopeful mentioned. It's got a brief description of the standard, and then I've highlighted a couple of sentences here that illustrate how the key ideas are in bold and they're embedded within that description. So if you're using a curriculum model, for example, Wiggins and McTighe, these key ideas are those enduring understandings that we want students to learn as they work through these standards and benchmarks. Next slide, please. This next screenshot shows a description of grades 9 through 12, and this is standard 5. And I have highlighted benchmark 5H to show you how this is structured, where each grade band has a brief description to talk about the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that students should study in that grade band. And then each benchmark has a leading sentence that says, in this case, to demonstrate their understanding of the influence of society on technological development, students in grades 9 through 12 should be able to, and then that leads into each benchmark. You notice the benchmark here starts with an active verb, which all benchmarks do. In this case, it is evaluate. Next slide, please. So whenever developing a lesson plan, a teacher should look at how a couple of benchmarks can be taught together to address a standard. It takes multiple benchmarks to effectively address a standard. The benchmark should be used as the foundational elements for all teaching and learning in technology and engineering education. And as I mentioned, each benchmark starts with an action verb that can be easily translated into a measurable assessment when we're teaching. Next slide, please. So let me elaborate a little more how curriculum developers and teachers can use STEL benchmarks to write instructional objectives for their lesson plans and their curriculum materials. So I'm going to use the ABCD method of writing objectives. And you can see I have it color coded here, where A is in green for the audience, B in red for the behavior that we're seeking. C are the conditions that we provide in the learning environment. And D is the degree of mastery we're looking for our students to obtain through our lesson. In the left, you can see that leading sentence and the benchmark from the previous slide, STEL 5H. So what I have done is I have added the condition and the degree of mastery. So you can see, given a country, the student will evaluate a technological innovation that arose from a specific society's unique need or want and has been adopted by most of the people in that country. So the audience is taken directly from the lead-in sentence from the benchmark. The student will. And the behavior in red is the actual benchmark with the active verb right from STEL. So in this example, I could give Dr. Hopeful Canada, and I could give Dr. Loveland South Africa, and they would look at a technology in that country that has been adopted by more than 50% of the population. And that's how I know that they have met the objective, is if they can provide evidence that that has been adopted. Very straightforward, very measurable. Next slide, please. You're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Phil. While the primary end user is understood to be the classroom technology and engineering teacher, the new standards should be adapted by many different groups of people and organizations. This would include teacher education programs at universities and colleges, the developers of teacher certification exams for technology and engineering education, textbook writers, national and state curriculum development teams, and more. Be sure to utilize and review the key terms and resources available through the full STEL book and online resources on the iteea.org website. We need each of you to be an ambassador of design-based learning and a champion for every student to become technologically and engineering literate. STEL does bring greater clarity as to what technology and engineering education is and how it fits into the education of all students. We are asking for your help in promoting technology and engineering education through the adoption of the STEL in your district, your state, and throughout the country. On the ITEEA website, if you search for STEL or click on the Standards for Technological and Engineering Literacy banner, it will take you to all of those resources. There's 3 tabs: an overview, STEL resources, and STEL summary references. The STEL is available for download in several formats. In addition, we are working on a variety of STEL support projects to develop additional resources and exemplars with your help to build viable curricula pre-K to 12. As we noted, there are different types of multiple resources available on the STEL website. The benchmark crosswalk links STEL benchmarks to next generation science standards, Common Core state standards in mathematics, Common Core state standards in English language arts. The marketing materials include an FAQ, videos, presentations, handouts, and other very useful materials. The benchmark verb matrix aligns the STEL benchmark verbs to the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. Please check the STEL website frequently as we add additional resources on a regular basis. The STEL resources webpage has a link to the STEL benchmark crosswalk to the NGSS and Common Core state standards, as I noted. And with the approved list in this process, they've been identified and connected. And this is what it looks like when you download it. So you have a quick, easy access to how it fits within the STEL benchmarks to these other curricula standards. And now I'd like to turn it over to Virginia Jones.
Hi. So when you look at this, as an elementary educator, it is evident that these STEL benchmarks are readily attainable because you harness that natural curiosity that's evident in learners of this age. We're looking at pre-K through 2nd grade. These examples show that it's very easy, if you use collaborative and engaging learning activities, that the students can cover all of the different standards, the NGSS, the Common Core, and the Common Core ELA. For example, looking around the classroom or your play area offers creative opportunities to make observations about our world and discuss sizes, shapes, clarify between natural objects such as trees, rocks, and man-made ones such as your playground equipment, your desks. You know, these standards are very rich in content and they're very easily translatable for elementary learners. Next slide. This right here is probably one of the greatest things here. This is the verb matrix, and it lists all these standards, the key ideas, the benchmarks, and the levels within the relevant domains of learning, as well as the type of knowledge that you want your student to get. So when you look at this matrix for standard 1, which is nature and characteristics of technology and engineering, you see the natural progression for comparison, and then they go to differentiation and designing up through middle level education, where they start using higher level verbs of investigating and applying creative problem solving strategies, up to the high school level with the highest level of analyzing and conducting research and developing or implementing plans that are cross-curricular in approach. And all of this helps to improve technological products or systems. So this is a truly natural scaffolding of learning and application tailored to the age of all levels of learners. Next.
Thank you, Virginia. ITEA is the premier organization providing information and support for technology and engineering education. The Standards for Technological and Engineering Literacy is a project of ITEA that was developed with support from the National Science Foundation and the Technical Foundation of America. We thank you for joining us today for this part of the presentation, and we are now open for questions. Rebecca, please assist us in fielding and directing the audience questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Great job, everyone. Before we begin with questions, just as a brief reminder, if you do have any questions about STEL, please submit your questions by pressing the Q&A button at the bottom center of your screen, and we will address them in the order that they are received. So when did you first get started creating the standards?
Do you want me to take that one?
Sure.
I think this started in 2018. It was really an idea that had been talked about for some time, and the Council on Technology and Engineering Teacher Education at that time, the officer team was quite interested in promoting this idea. And so we began working with ITEA and wrote a grant proposal to get this ball rolling. So we were fortunate in getting funding from the National Science Foundation, Technical Foundation a little bit later on. And through the spring of 2019, we had a leadership team. There were 8 individuals that wrote kind of a rationale and background document, which is long and probably a little more involved than you might want to dive into, but it gives a good sense of the literature review and the early thinking about the structure of the standards. We held a writing team conference, and this is where we brought together those, I think it was 42 individuals total. Really nice representation, an amazing work team at a conference in August 2019 in Florida. And a lot of work got done at that, and then some refinement was done. We had actually a total of 4 rounds of reviews on it, and the document that you see today that was published officially in July 2020. So as a result of that, about 1.5 years worth of work.
Thank you. We have another question. Will the interactive octagons be available to use as a guide? Those are pretty cool.
They are pretty cool. So right now they're just in the PowerPoint as that GIF and also in the video, but we are working with some app developers right now to place it onto our website in a 3-dimensional mode, as well as in a mobile device app. So we're hoping to be able to have that available by our conference. That's what we're shooting for right now.
And if Tom Loveland has his way, it'll actually be a cardboard thing with, you know, a pin in the middle that you can, he's got a vision for that. One of those in every classroom.
So we actually did a presentation to the New York State Technology and Engineering Educator Association a little while back, and we actually got an idea from one of the teachers, and she put together a mock-up, a prototype of exactly what it should look like. And I sent that to Dr. Loveland. It definitely made his day, that's for sure.
And since you mentioned the conference, what could we expect to see at the ITA conference in the spring in terms of STEL? Will there be a presentation or any additional focus on it?
There will be. So some of the councils, our Council for Technology and Engineering Teacher Education, our Council for Supervision and Leadership, as well as our Elementary STEM Council, will all be involving presentations within their own groups regarding the STEL and where we're at and where to take them. So that'll be happening. We also have a pre-conference session that will be focusing on the STEL, and we'll have a variety of individual sessions that educators have already put together from the writing team, from the big group of 40 that are in as regular sessions as well.
I'll just mention a couple more things. There's a special, I think the November issue of the Technology and Engineering Teacher Journal in November is going to be focused on STEL and, you know, various aspects of STEL. And Steve already mentioned this, but there's a lot on the website, on the ITEA website, STEL website, and there will continue to be materials added. So, you know, including lesson plans. We've got plans underway for, you know, curriculum models that are STEL based. So there's a lot more coming down the pike that will be available to teachers.
Great, and if you take a look at the chat, there's a link there that Joe with ITA just posted that can take you to all of the STEL resources.
And Rebecca, let me add that as the co-editor of the Elementary STEM Journal for the next 2 years, so starting with the one that comes out in September, or just came out a couple days ago, every issue we are going to focus on the standards and have articles that deal with those, so you can get a little precursor before you go to the conference. You can start reading about them and knowing more what's going on.
Oh, that's great. Good, thanks for letting us know about that. To what extent were they inspired by the work of the Next Generation Science Standards?
Phil, you want to take that one?
Yeah, the leadership team and then also the 40 writers that worked on STEL talked a lot about contemporary disciplinary standards projects, and NGSS was probably the most influential. Additionally, one of the past presidents, Patricia Simmons from National Science Teaching Association, was integral in the writing and provided a lot of advice and leadership because she had been integral with Next Generation Science Standards. And she continues to work with the team on that. I think if you look at the crosswalk that Steve and Dr. Jones highlighted, you'll see that there are a lot of connections between NGSS and the benchmarks of STEL.
Thanks, Phil. Can you further discuss how this will impact Common Core state standards? Do you think individual states will update their standards to coincide with the new STEL?
I'll lead off on this one, and then if you guys want to add your thoughts. It was a little bit surprising to me, I'm not sure about the rest of the team, about how quickly we started to receive in early July input as to how states can adopt them. We really didn't get to that point, and we were so busy in developing them that the adoption process, we sort of thought about it and I was like, well, let's wait and see and see what happens. Right now, there's a lot of momentum moving in that direction. So we're working with several states right now that are aligning and using the benchmark crosswalks, the actual STEL benchmarks overall, to support movement and variety of states to adopt them officially. And we're here to help you with that process, and we're looking forward to seeing that move forward. The Common Core state standards are so political in nature. In a lot of states, it's tough to just attach to them only. So we usually talk about them all together. So next generation science standards, along with the math and ELA Common Core, and also connected to a variety of other standards in a variety of different other disciplines, whether it be art and music and those kinds of areas as well. So we're hoping that it has a cross-curricular kind of impact when it comes to standards.
Yeah, I'll add on to that and use Virginia as an example. Our governor decided to stick with our state standards. So Virginia is not a Common Core standard user, but the Virginia Department of Education has done very detailed crosswalks to both the language arts and the mathematics Common Core state standards. So it's very similar to the crosswalk that we showed you that has been done with STEL. So I think states that don't use the Common Core typically have those types of tools for curriculum and lesson planning purposes.
Great, thank you. So that kind of goes along with, we received another question about using the new STEL in a review of an existing curriculum. So I think you mentioned that's something that we would provide the support if needed for a school district if they were adopting these STEL standards into already existing technology curriculum.
If I understand that question correctly, I'll say that through the STEM Center for Teaching and Learning within ITEEA, we have the resources and knowledge base to look at curriculum, professional development, research, and assessment within our field. And with school district development, we can review and provide feedback and endorsements as needed, as they're developed. So I would shoot those to our STEM Center and to ITEA at itea.org, and we'll work with you.
Great, thanks, Steve. I will add that we kind of touched upon STEL a little bit at our previous seminar with the IEEE REACH project that they have with connecting social studies with technology. So that was a great component of STEL that seems to be ever so much growing in social studies curriculum as well. So I'll just read some good comments, not really questions, but just praise from our chat if no one else has any other questions. So Mike Fitzgerald mentioned, yay, STEL, I like how it is designed. I wish it would have been this easy back when it was originally released in 1999. There's one more. Congratulations, the work of the new standards is excellent. It was necessary and urgent. So thanks, everyone. Do you have any final notes about STEL, or have there been any other common questions that you've come across so far?
I think the time for us to go out and share it across the country is critical, and we need everybody that's out there to do that. I do see one more question popped in.
Yep. Let's see. I like the new STEL. The most recent Foundations of Technology curriculum from ITEEA was released in 2019. If ITA knew that a new STEL was going to be released, why was Foundations of Technology launched earlier? I know that FOT is not the only introductory high school course, but is the one most aligned with the old STEL or STL. Is there a plan to update FOT?
So we will be adjusting each of the engineering by design courses to make sure that they are aligned. The great part is when you look at the 8 core standards, we did not eliminate standards with content. So that content can be taught within the context as we're teaching them. But those 8 core standards didn't lose any of the standards that we had before. What it did was condense them into those 8. And the design world component 13 to 20 got moved into those contexts. So right now, the current courses, the way they're written, align pretty well. And as we're doing our correlations, we're finding that that is true. as we're moving forward. So to answer that question, we will be updating and adjusting as needed if there are gaps in those courses.
I'm just going to add, and I meant to kind of highlight this earlier, but I think a really important difference in this in STEL compared to the original standards is the way that the benchmarks are structured. You know, in the STLs, all of the 288 benchmarks were written as kind of conceptual statements. And we really thought long and hard about the need to operationalize the benchmarks. So I think just overall, because of maybe that one even feature, it's going to really help make this document easier to implement and easier to apply. But you know, there are going to be a lot of other support materials that are out there. So we're looking forward to seeing, you know, updated curriculum models, support materials, et cetera, related to that. It's hard not to get, you know, kind of ahead of oneself because you want to have everything happening all at once now that the thing has been released. But
Thanks, Marie. What relationship, if any, exists between STEL and the ISTE standards?
I can address that a little bit. So the crosswalk that has been done was actually done as research projects by several students at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore under Tom Loveland. And we already have plans to do a similar activity with some graduate researchers to look at the ISTE standards and see how they are aligned.
Thanks, Phil. What about the ITEA ambassadors, or are there other activities to bring STEL to other nations? Bring it international.
So I'll lead into this, and then I'll probably hand it over to Phil on this next one, on the second part of this. It's a great question to ask. We are currently in the process of writing a STEL grant part 2 to the NSF to actually create ambassadors and super users and do training of that. Phil, do you want to just talk a little bit about the overview of that project? And
yeah, we're looking at doing a lot of activities, developing workshops to bring teachers in to create those ambassadors and super users as Steve described. And we're also looking at updating all of the engineering by design curriculum to align to STEL. There are some other activities going on internationally. We've been in talks with folks in Korea and China, and where else, Steve, to translate?
Korea and Japan.
And Japan, so
and
China.
Also Australia right now. So those are the countries in Japan, Korea, China, and what was the one I missed? Korea, China, Japan. There's another one. There's 4 of them. They need to be translated. So they're working on with us on the translations, and we have agreements with them. The International Centers page on our website has where they're identified and what the projects are right now, and we'll be posting and updating those as we work through this. If you know of anyone in other countries that are interested in developing a partnership with us, on that international career page is the place to do it, and they can contact us and we'll arrange it.
Awesome, great. Is there a relationship between this ITEA team and the AEEE Engineering Literacy Project?
So we have Tanner Huffman, Mike Grubbs, Greg Strimmel, and Jamie Garganis as part of our strategic plan. There's a strategic plan on the AE3 project that's connected to that. And the task force that they're leading develops support, research, and also action items that will come out of this together with their leadership. So they're an integral part of this process.
Alrighty, well, we have a couple more just comments from the chat. Mike Fitzgerald is looking forward to the cardboard handheld STEL charts. Easy to use and fun. Thank you for your work. I hope more states look at STEL and realize they need to be part of the state standards. And this was great. Thanks for all the hard work you did on this new document. So thank you, everyone.